Hello and welcome to the webinar Cyber Attack Stories and How to Not Be a Victim. I'm your host today, Nick Pidek. I am the Chief Marketing Officer of BitLyft Cybersecurity, and we are really excited that you're here today. I'm going to go over a few technical housekeeping details and then we'll dive into the content for today. If you have any questions throughout this live webinar, you can enter those directly into the question box, and we'll circle back at the end of this presentation for a Q&A session. If you're watching this on demand, you can see our contact information at the end of this presentation and reach out to any of the speakers and we'll get back to you. A brief overview of the companies here represented today. BitLyft Cybersecurity is focused on faster, smarter, and proactive cybersecurity with managed cybersecurity as a service with 24/7 monitoring and support, dedicated security team to help companies meet their compliance and reporting needs, and really scalable to fit small to medium-sized enterprises. We also have Global Data Vault, a backup and recovery fully managed service. They're Veeam experts with enhanced data protection, with really simplified pricing. And something you're going to see today is a really cool integration between these two companies and why they're such a good pairing. Our speakers for today, which we're really excited to have with us here today, are the founder and CEO of BitLyft, Jason Miller. If you'd say hello.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining.
We also have Will Basich, the CEO of Global Data Vault.
Thank you, Nick. It's great to be here.
And we have Brian Brignac, the Director of Sales for Global Data Vault.
Hello, everyone.
So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jason, and we'll get right into the content.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are, or thank you and just welcome and joining for today's webinar. We're excited to have you, and we're excited to share the content with you today. The content that you're going to see here today is real life scenarios. We all call those case studies in the industry, and they are situations that have happened to our clients or even clients before they were actually a client and they came to us and needed help. So we are going to share these to you both on the BitLyft cybersecurity side of the house and how we worked with Global Data Vault to help be a complete solution, working together as two partners with the client as a partner. In that, there's a couple of case studies. We're going to go through Waukesha County Technical College case study. UEBA, if that's a new term for you, that's User Entity Behavior Analytics. A couple of municipal case studies, some takeaways, and then after that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian Brignac to go over a food supplier case study and really talk about response and recovery, and then we'll end on a conclusion. We're going to leave plenty of time for some Q&A. Just because of the topics that we're going to talk about today, we presume that you guys will have some questions for us. So without further ado, as you guys all know, I'm taking some assumptions that you're well aware of the cybersecurity landscape today. You might even have experienced a compromised account in Office 365 or Google Gmail, where somebody has your credentials. We experienced this with a client that was just about ready to sign the contract with us, and then they called us one day. And they said, hey, we believe that we've got an issue here. We've got a lot of students and staff and faculty that have been getting emails that look really legit, and they're asking them to make a payment. And we feel like we've got a major problem on our hands here. So we started to deep dive into this situation. We quickly found out that they had over 2,000 accounts compromised. Waukesha County Technical College is a college of a mindset where even after you graduated, you were still able to hold on to your .edu email address. And so the widespread issue was both undergrad students, staff and faculty, and even some graduate students that still had accounts that were active. And what happened here is the on-site IT team really didn't quite understand what they should do for next steps. You know, they're smart, But at the same token, that many accounts compromised is, how do you address it, right? So we put together a roadmap with them, and they felt like it was going to initially take weeks to clean this up. We implemented our platform. So BitLyft has what we call an AIR platform. Automated Incident Response is what AIR stands for. It utilizes what we call SOAR modules. They're security, orchestration, automated response for Office 365 and a bunch of other products. But since they were having the most pain and challenges in Office 365, we needed to address those quickly. Our solution helped them remediate those 2,000 compromised accounts in minutes by either forcing a reset and a logout of all of their devices, changing their credentials, and then causing automated email workflows to happen afterwards, because they needed to let not only the students, staff, and faculty know that they could no longer get into that account via a alternative email address, either a text message or a phone call, and then start to actually go through the remediation process of getting the accounts turned back on with the users. And then what we did here is we actually let Waukesha know that going forward in the future, they're actually better prepared and they're ready if this situation arises again. I will say that out of 60% of our client base is higher ed, colleges and universities. And out of those colleges and universities that are our clients, we experience business email account compromise across all of them, probably hundreds a week. So we knew that they were going to have this issue going again in the future. We just wanted to better equip them with it, which we did. Another aspect of this is user entity behavior analytics. And what really is behind this acronym is the identity of users and systems inside of a IT network. It is really the fingerprint, or what we would call the makeup of a user or service. So if you want to understand, we all have a habit and a nature of getting up every day, getting a cup of coffee if you drink coffee, and getting on your laptop or your phone, checking your email, and you kind of have this routine, right? What UBA is really looking for is identifying that routine, and maybe even identifying some variations of that routine. And what we do is that is considered inside of the algorithms. It is an understanding of your baseline, and it's an understanding of what's normal, and then it helps identify what's abnormal around user activity. Now, this isn't trying to figure out, you go check your bank website and things like that. This is trying to figure out that you do actually perform email, you perform work inside of ERP or a CRM, or the other activities that you do inside of your day-to-day work at business. But at the same time, it's also to understand what you don't do, right? And so if your user account has never touched some files on the file server before, or it has never went and sent out 500 emails in the matter of 5 minutes to all of these other email addresses, those are the abnormal activities that our system is trying to pick up, right, for clients. At the same time, over time, that baseline really helps us identify the needle in a haystack. And I think that that's a term that everybody understands today. But, oftentimes the cybersecurity attack, the avenue and the vector in which you're being attacked is really like a needle in the haystack, and you've got to try and find it. And the fourth point here that I really wanted to drive home is that these user behavior analytics, they help us to really create the alarms and the actions. And what we did with Waukesha is they turned into automated remediation of bad activity immediately. So now when they have a business account, email account compromise, the remediation happens within less than a minute, versus dwell time for a criminal inside of your email is pretty bad. And so you don't even want to let that go hours or days or weeks. You want it to be remediated quickly. One other aspect that we'd like to share with you today is municipals. We're a big helper and client base inside of Municipal Energy. And so what happened that we have been seeing an uptick in even just the last 2 to 6 months is a focus and a change on internal account compromise. And what I mean by that is that if you've ever had this is a real life situation where the IT manager recognized some kind of abnormal behavior being observed. We didn't have the user behavior turned on for their environment yet. They were in the initial phases of coming on board. And so what the IT manager asked us to do is he reached out to us and said, we've seen some behavior on the firewall, and I've also seen some behavior. He had Cisco Meraki firewalls and Cisco Meraki switches. And we see some behavior on the network that doesn't quite add up to us, and we need some help. So what we did was we came in and we implemented our AIR platform pretty quickly. We even spent some, nights and over the weekend on really getting it implemented into the environment as quick as we could to get a broad understanding of what was happening, specifically because they were a power provider, energy provider. And we quickly found out that a machine on the network was infected, and we quarantined the machine. We used some of our automated incident response modules to quarantine that machine off the network as quick as we identified that it was definitely positively doing bad stuff. But all of that to say is that we were actually able to do the forensics and figure out that it was a phishing attack. So the attack started out via email, and the user gave up their credentials and got them to log into a site. And a lot of people don't know this, but if you just log into a website, you have interacted with the website, and a dropper is what we call it, dropped out of the website and onto the local machine. And then what happened was it was able to start performing activity on that local machine. And the user did have admin rights on the local machine. And so that's kind of a big no-no, but that was happening. What we did identify is there wasn't any sort of data exfiltration when we did our initial analysis and discovery here, but it did look like the beginning signs of ransomware. And so quarantining that machine and stopping it was a good thing. They did have to roll back to some data, though, on the local laptop, and it was a good thing that they were actually performing backups on some of these endpoints, because then they could roll back to an original restore point on the laptop, and the user wasn't out of his machine for too long. But they did have to do a data recovery. The other avenue that I want to explain here, and it's an important one, is vendor spear phishing. And you might think that this is a new term or a weird term, but what we've seen a major uptick in is a vendor sent this municipality an invoice with specifying updated ACH information and a W-9 form. And everything was correct, meaning the W-9 form was properly filled out, and the FEIN number was in that form, and everything looked good. And so what happened was that the people in accounts payable changed the information and went on about their day. What is more important here is that when I say that the money was sent to the trusted vendor, the accounts payable team truly thought that they were sending money to the intended party. And here's what happened is in today's landscape, everybody is utilizing vendors, right? Everybody has partners, vendors that you're working with. And what happens is if each of us don't take cybersecurity extremely important, we might become the pivotal point or the attack vector for one of our customers downstream to become attacked. And this is happening almost monthly now. We're seeing it where a vendor sends a particular email and the account was correct. In this situation, it was the vendor's account that was already compromised. So the email address was correct, the domain name was correct, and it was a valid email account. It was a valid person. And so it was difficult to detect this. But going forward, what this municipal and we would really recommend is having a policy in place that once certain things are asked over email, is that the recipient of that request picks up the phone and contacts the person asking for the request to be done and validate it. Because in this case, the money was sent. The attackers, here's what's happening is the attackers are actually using that vendor trust against the organization. And I want that to sink in for a moment because again, we all work with so many vendors today and we're moving so fast and transactions are moving quickly over email. But what's happening is that if your account is compromised and you don't know it, and you inadvertently, not you yourself, but the criminal sends an email on your behalf, and they're sly. They're going to move the email out of your sent items folder, and they're also watching your inbox to see if the email comes back, right? And the moment that it does come back, they're also looking at that email and moving it out of your inbox. And their whole game is to stay under the radar. But this is what's happening is that attacker listened and mimicked the vendor behavior before the day they ever sent the invoice with the W-9 form. It was all calculated. And this is what we have been trying to inform and educate organizations and companies is that oftentimes you could be being monitored right now. A criminal could be monitoring your email. Criminal could be monitoring your laptop or a server. And the only way to know it is to really know your network, doing monitoring and detection on your network in depth. But we're proving case after case after case where attackers had access to these accounts for periods of time that they noticed enough behavior that they just mimicked that vendor behavior, and then they were able to perform their attack. So this is some takeaways before I hand it off to Brian here in a moment, is we really want to emphasize user behavior analytics provides visibility and identity protection across the whole organization, as well as the individual employees and the service accounts that are running inside the organization. We often ask our clients, how many employees do you have? And they'll say, well, we have 350 or 400 or 50 employees, whatever the number is. And then what we do is we also ask them, how many service accounts do you have running in the environment? And they're like, well, why does that matter? Well, that's really important because there's a lot of service accounts that are running inside of the environment that often have elevated privileges, that often have either enterprise admin rights or they have some sort of additional privileges, which allow them to go and do work in the environment that can often be unidentified or misidentified, or can fly underneath the radar and you never realize that service account is going and doing activity. You need to have a response for suspicious behavior, and you need to have a quick response. The average dwell time of criminals inside of environments, even today, is still weeks and months, just depending on whose report you read out there in the public market. Recognize your own limitations. This is important. Oftentimes, IT teams that we're talking to today, they say, well, yeah, we've got 3 people or 7 people or 25 people in our IT department. All of us are kind of trying to wear the security hat. The important one here is to identify that limitation on the team and say, you know what, we're doing an okay job, but we might not be doing a good job or even a great job. And it's okay to say that. I think it's more important to say it now, early on, than wait till later. Understanding that vendors are an avenue of attack against your organization. Somebody needs to say it in your environment. You need to identify it. You need to identify your vendors that are stronger in the security realm, and you need to identify your vendors that are weaker in the security realm. And let's be honest, nobody wants to identify that they're weak in an area, but not all of us are scoring A+ on security. And so what we just need to do is to say, hey, where do you need help? Maybe we could help you. Maybe we have knowledge that we could share with you to help you get better. And I know this last bullet point of treat everyone as untrusted. I know this is probably not going to be well liked, but what this is this is getting us closer to the zero trust model that a lot of us cybersecurity companies are trying to follow and trying to even get our clients to follow. It just makes us think and validate and even double check some of the things that are happening inside of the environment, or all things that are happening inside the environment, to get us better. We've been laxed on cybersecurity for so many years. We've got to go to a zero trust model for quite some time to get the scale moved up, if you will. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Brignac, who is going to talk to you today about this food supplier and their case study. Brian?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Jason. And hey, and we appreciate the partnership with BitLyft. It's a valuable partnership, I think, between both companies. To just kind of brief a little bit. So, Jason, you just talked about the takeaways on, what an organization needs to do as far as response, recognize, be trusting of their vendors, and so forth. So, just to kind of educate the attendees on the webinar here. Global Data Vault and BitLyft have, I think, bi-weekly calls internally between your engineering team and our engineering team to kind of educate each other on ways that we plan and to prevent attacks. But of course, we all know, like Jason said, attacks are going to happen. So when they do happen, it's all about how can we recover effectively with the tools that both of us have put in place for each customer to effectively do that. So I'm just going to kind of lead into our food supplier case study, but for everybody on the call, everybody has heard in the media reports about the city of Atlanta, the city of Newark. There's a lot of municipality that has been broadcast on the news that have been attacked, but there's so many more that go unheard of. And that goes for our customers as well. We experience this at least once or twice a month, some more severe than others, which kind of leads me into the case study that we're going to present today. This is a family-owned food supplier, very large in the Midwest. They were founded before World War II, so they've been around a very long time. And they've actually experienced 2 attacks, one prior to us. That's kind of what generated the initiative to find a backup and disaster recovery plan. And then, of course, once they became a customer, they were about 200 servers, about 75 terabytes. And they also protect their Office 365 environment as well. At the time of the second attack, once they were our customer, I think they were a customer about 2 years. The attack was very sophisticated, and everybody knows, and again, you could read in the media reports, they're getting very sophisticated on how they launch these attacks. This attack that we're going to discuss right now was a self-building PowerShell script. What it did was basically deletes the offsite backup repository. and then they start encrypting everything locally, because they know if the customer has a means to recover from offsite, they're not going to get paid. So they're basically deleting the offsite backups, then encrypting the local side, and then they initiate the ransom demand. This is exactly what normally happens, but this customer was a little bit unique. They just went ahead and deleted everything on the cloud side and then deleted all the local backups. Global Data Vault, in partnership with BitLyft, have incorporated a mechanism to recover from these type of attacks, because you heard me say the offsite backups were deleted. So in a normal case, you would have nothing to recover from. So we call it enhanced data protection, which is basically an invisible recycle bin that runs parallel to their current live repository. It's off network. The customer has no access to it, which means the attacker has no access to it. In this case, that is exactly what we recovered from. Once we found out, we got the initiation call from the customer, and that's how we started back the recovery process. So I just want to cover the three things on how we respond to an attack like this. The first thing is security. We have to have that security in place. Firewall patching, antivirus, it's just not enough these days, because the attacks are just getting more sophisticated. So we internally use BitLyft in our 2 data center infrastructures. So we've implemented their artificial intelligence into our data centers. We enact whitelist only policies via BitLyft's PowerShell. And then we know that it's only our PowerShell scripts that can function within our environments, nothing malicious. Once a recovery takes place, our enhanced data protection will effectively recover these files that have been deleted. On this customer, we built 140 critical servers in about 60 minutes. We deployed an open VPN connection and then securely transmitted the credentials. The customers ran those servers in our environments for about a week or a little bit less than that. Then we initiated the backups of the new cloud environment. And I'm going to kind of touch base a little bit more on the recovery process, because you learn things as you go. And we learned a few things with this customer and just the way that they access the new site. The failback process, which was the last process to get everything back recovered. They were running in our environment based off of those enhanced data protection snapshots that we recovered from. And then in the meantime, we were taking backups internally. And then also in the process, they had cleaned the local infection, and we prepared a remote server to go back to them once we seeded the data. This was basically sent overnight, and they had added back into their local environment to complete the recovery. Since then, this customer, we have then put their own firewall and VPN access firewall in our infrastructure. So they have their own dedicated connectivity at this point, which kind of eases some of the pain of them connecting to our infrastructure and then trying to fail back. And with that conclusion, I just want to kind of give you a few of the highlights that I talked about. Cyber attacks are a real threat to any organization. I think we can all agree internally here that it's just a matter of time that if whatever tools and processes and security measures you have in place, they're going to get attacked at some point, and or you prepared. So monitoring, detection, and response is always critical. We all know backups are essential, but if they get into this internal or external backups and those are deleted, this is how Global Data Vault effectively can recover with our enhanced data protection. And this is all built on the technology between the Veeam software and BitLyft security that kind of incorporate both solutions into one environment. So we feel like we go a little bit above and beyond. We are in the data protection business. So what steps we take to assure that our customers' success in the event something happens like that is really a no-brainer. BitLyft and Global Data Vault, we provide that additional layer of protection. And just to let you know, that customer is never alone. It's all about planning and executing when something like this takes place. And I think between the two of us, Jason, it's a great partnership. And I think we effectively prove that on a monthly basis when we experience some of our customers having these types of attacks.
I couldn't agree more, Brian. I think of many of the times over the last few months that you and I and the teams have been on the phone at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, working with the client and trying to get them back up and into a good state again after going through a problem like this.
Yeah, agreed. So with that, we'll go ahead and open it up to questions.
Thank you so much, Jason, Will, and Brian. I want to bring this back as the audience is entering some questions here. Something I wanted to circle back to, which was, and this can be for any of you to answer, do you see any biggest or most common entry points for ransomware? Is there a common area that these are getting in that you see across the board with the clients that you work with?
Jason, why don't you go first, and I'll elaborate.
Yeah, so we see email as being kind of the number one vector. 9 out of 10 times, email is the first way. And it's either to get them to enter credentials into something. So the phishing, like, hey, we just launched a new portal. You have an American Express account, or you have something that the user works with or does something with. Oftentimes it's Amazon Web Services or even Microsoft Office 365 or Azure gets you to go and plug in your credentials somewhere. The second aspect of that is even if they can get you to go to the site, so you click on the link and you go to the site, we are seeing advanced sites right now that if you go to the site, you can become compromised even just by going to the site. You don't even need to click on anything. And so those are some of the initial ways that we have seen the latest versions of ransomware starts out as malware, get onto machines and become infected. The one other thing I'll say, Brian, and then I'll turn it over to you, is that we see a lot of clients where the local backups are deleted. Those remote cloud backups are also attacked. And so that's why we have built this partnership between BitLyft and Global Data Vault, is because Global Data Vault is very forward thinking in that regard and knew about it. And then we're also looking at activity inside of the Veeam console and activity that would start to identify the beginning stages of an account being compromised and the backup starting to be deleted, which is abnormal because, let's face it, a system administration account shouldn't be going in and deleting backups at mass like what we've seen. Brian?
Yep. Yeah, and you're right. And that's why I think the BitLyft GDV relationship, because I think we're educating ourselves, both sides of the aisle, on how to get better at what we do. And to kind of elaborate, you are 100% correct. It is definitely email that is the biggest threat to organizations. And, there's a few that are penetrated through network vulnerabilities. But you're right, it's definitely through email, phishing attacks, very sophisticated emails. That's mostly what we're seeing as well.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that. This question is more geared towards Global Data Vault. What would you say are the biggest missteps organizations take as it relates to backups? What are kind of some of the organizations think they're doing the right thing, but you come in and are seeing things from a different angle? How would you outline those missteps for people?
Great question. Whoever asked that. So Global Data Vault, I think we are unique in the way we operate. We want to be problem solvers. So when a customer, we just don't just onboard a customer. we like to spend time with them with an engineer to talk about their pain points, what's their expectations. But backup is just really never enough. You have to be secure. You have to have a second layer of an additional protection in the event, because it's easy for even insider attack or a rogue employee to delete the backups. And then once that happens, you're kind of hanging in the wind. So by having BitLyft and then the enhanced data protection with the invisible repository gives those customers an extra layer that if something like that does happen and we can't access the backups, we have that second layer to recover from. So that's more about, it's really, easing the pain and giving them that warm and fuzzy feeling that, hey, if something horrible does happen, what's my options? Well, by having this partnership is the first step to being able to recover and execute effectively.
And you guys, this is Will. If my audio is okay, I'd like to add a point there.
Yeah, go for it, Will.
It's a great question. What sort of missteps do we see regarding backups? And I think the biggest one, and it might be the founding idea and the founding principle of global data development, is that the backup does not simply just take care of itself, and it's always been a mindset among many IT organizations to set it and forget it. And not looked after, it eventually will not be meeting the needs of the organization, because it will fall out of SLA. Things will change. Things will get added, changed, deleted. Those changes won't be properly reflected in the backup configuration. And that's one of the most important roles that we serve. Keeping an eye on what we call quality, and the quality to us, is not. If you ask us about quality, we don't want to tell you about our great infrastructure or technology. What we want to tell you about is the freshness of the data that you have. Quality to us is when an event occurs, how quickly and how recently are we going to be able to restore the data that you need. So I think it's around quality and the idea of management and monitoring that is so important, that is value add that we see. And we think that's really hard for IT organizations, because so many of them have so many initiatives to deal with, and backup is always kind of at the end of the train. It's not revenue producing. It's not customer facing. It doesn't help the organization improve the quality of whatever that organization does, right? Except to the extent that when you need it, it better be there. So that's I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is to focus on quality.
Yeah, thank you, Will. It was a little bit hard to hear you, but just to recap, it's more about the quality of the backup and keeping an eye on it, not a set it and forget it. I've got another question, Jason. You talk about UBA and visibility. Organization that's set today. When you talk about UBA and what it brings to a layer as a layer of protection or a feature of protection, how would a company or organization go about getting UBA in their environment?
So what we would do is we would implement a security information event management, a SIM, that has UBA built into the platform. It's part of our BitLyft Air platform that we offer. And what we would do is there is agents and agentless type framework to do the deployment. But at the same token, we are looking through and analyzing the logs and the log activity, as well as the authentications in the environment and what the user and user accounts and service accounts are doing all day, every day. And it is it's important for that knowledge base to build up in the environment, in the algorithm, so that it can help quickly identify activity that is both good and bad. But that is essentially how we would do that for a client, and that's what we're doing for even like Global Data Vault in their clients. So user behavior analytics is very important because we have quickly identified situations where a local account has deleted the local backups, and then it's turning around and it's starting to do some other activity. And we are identifying that and neutralizing the account, meaning disabling the account so the account can't continue to do what we would consider malicious activity. And then when you do that in seconds, and then you go and communicate with the team, hey, this is what our system and platform just identified inside of your network. They're like, oh my gosh, thank you. Because yeah, that account was compromised. It just did this stuff. And so our whole game is to stop it in its tracks before it gets really bad. Sometimes you need to watch it do some things. And that's what our platform does, is it watches it, but then it watches it up to enough point where it is abnormal enough activity that we can then neutralize it in seconds, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'm going to bring it in here for a close. Is there anything else that any of you wanted to mention or talk about for cyber attack stories and how to prevent them, or something that you didn't cover yet today?
I think the only thing that I would identify with, both Global Data Vault and us has seen this in our clients that we have worked with back and forth, is, as Brian kind of mentioned, is there's a lot of clients that really rely on their backups. Some of them may even not be doing cybersecurity well today because they say, we've got backups, and if something happens, we'll just revert to a backup. That's part of your business DR strategy plan. But the other point of it is that what if data is exfiltrated at the time or just before the time your environment was ransomed? We even seen this in the latest case. If you go out and look at Michigan State University's recent ransomware attack, before they ransomed the environment, they exfiltrated a whole bunch of data. And they did this to protect themselves. They hedged their bet. And what's important to identify here is that the criminal wants to ensure that you're going to pay. And if you're not going to pay, they're going to have a recourse methodology. And in the case of Michigan State University, it's near and dear to our heart because we're located in Lansing, Michigan, is that in that case, the criminal dumped the data when Michigan State University said, you know what, we're not going to pay this ransom. We're not going to pay the criminals. And so they reverted to backups over the course of the next few days. But at that same point, they took the risk of their data getting dumped publicly. And now there's cleanup after that. So you might have your backups, and they might be in great shape, and you might have a second set and a third set of backups. But you also need to be prepared with the mindset that what if they dumped our data publicly online? What is our next steps after that?
Yeah.
Nick, I don't really have much else unless you do, Brian, but.
That's great. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you guys taking the time today to talk with us. If anyone has any more questions or wants to dig a little bit deeper, you can visit bitlyft.com or globaldatavault.com as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day.